Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Happy 2021. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Allison Green, the Manager of Partner Training, Support, and Engagement at MICAH. I'm also on the ID Task Force. So today we're going to be talking about utilizing the Secretary of State ID fee waiver and the exception process. So if you thought you were here for a different topic, this is the one we're doing. So we know that there's been some issues with using the fee waiver since COVID has been going on. It's hard to get appointments, it's hard to get documents for folks. So we just wanted to make sure that everybody had a refresher or an introduction to the process if you haven't had one yet, and then we'll discuss some little workarounds that we have during COVID. You are all the attendees are on mute. If you have a question, please type it into the chat. This webinar and the chat are both being recorded and will be posted later. You should be able to get the PowerPoint right now in the handout section of GoToWebinar, and then all the documents that we discussed during the training will be emailed out after, along with the PowerPoint to everyone who registered. The woman of the hour is Elizabeth Kelly. She will be going through this PowerPoint with us, and I will try to answer questions as needed. Elizabeth Kelly is the Executive Director of Hope Inc., one of our shelters in Pontiac. So
Right.
to you,
Thank
Elizabeth.
you, Allison. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today on the call. So we'll go to the next slide. We have a few housekeeping and logistics things. As Allison mentioned, everyone who's participating today will receive all the documents, including the PowerPoint, after the workshop, or there'll be a link for that. And we also will encourage you to subscribe to the ID Task Force listserv. These are virtual monthly meetings for updates and revised forms and ways to bring ID issues to the Secretary of State, Social Security Administration, and also MDHHS vital records. So we have relationships with folks that are decision makers in all three areas. And so when something is going on in your area, this is a quick way to be able to get some good brainstorming going on. And then also, if you are the only one in your agency or one of a few in your agency, you could also be considered a trainer for your organization after this workshop, and train people in what it is that, in all about the ID and getting IDs for people. Today, we're also going to cover a little bit about some of the pandemic stuff as well. So if we'll go to the next slide. So here's our agenda. The agenda includes about accessing the fee waiver process. And this is how this works. There are some document modifications that are available to people who are homeless, but that doesn't mean that all documents are able to be modified. And so we're going to talk about that. And then the exception process, and that is something that is a really valuable tool. You can basically email all of the documents to the Secretary of State's exception unit, and they will be able to help you with making sure that before your program participant goes to the Secretary of State that they have the documents that they need. And then there's an area that we're going to talk about that's for the pandemic only. So these are temporary workarounds when the Secretary of State branch has a multiple month backlog, and that's only occurring in certain places in the state, so your area of the state might not be impacted by that. Next slide, please. Okay, and then moving on to the next. I know we all feel like that guy at the desk. So this particular grid you'll find on the Secretary of State website. This is, and if you look on Secretary of State or Department of Motor Vehicle websites throughout the United States, they have something similar. There are 4 categories. So the one is your, that you have to demonstrate a valid Social Security number. The second one is legal presence. Third, identity verification. And the fourth is proof of Michigan residency. These are really important that you have to have something from each one of these categories because that is mandated by the 2005 Real ID laws that we are now supposed to be in compliance with. They've actually moved the official compliance to October 1st of 2021 because of the pandemic, but that's the one that will show a little star on your driver's license or your state ID that shows that you've submitted all these documents. If you got your driver's license a long time ago, you didn't have to submit near as many proof documents, but the idea is to make sure that every state has the same process. And so these are all things that you have to do. So the next slide, please. Okay, so proof documents. So the first thing is we're going to talk about is the waiver itself. So back in 2018, we were able to get an amendment to the free ID for me to their rules, and that will allow for both veterans and people experiencing homelessness to get a free ID card. So veterans, it doesn't mean a driver's license though. It's only good for the ID, that $10 card. And so in that document, in that grid that you just saw, this particular, if we can just click one more time and you'll actually see the third-party homeless verification form. This is something that is peculiar to the documents that you need in order to qualify for the fee waiver. But the good part is in column 4, you needed 2 documents. This one is one single document that replaces that. And that's the area where you have to prove where you live. And they usually make you bring in, say, a bank statement or a utility bill, a lease, that sort of thing. So that is your proof of Michigan residency. So the individual must have a physical address. So most shelters and a lot of other agencies will allow individuals to get mail at that address. And so you'll see that this is a letter that can't be altered at all. And I want to make sure that that's clear. Just take this letter, paste it on your agency letterhead. You have to put the date. As it says, it must be within 30 days of the application, the name of the person. So you don't want to really do this until you've gotten all the other legal documents together and you know that they're going to the Secretary of State, their date of birth, and their HMIS number. And that is important, the HMIS number, because the other proof document that you're going to also send that also triggers the fee waiver is the service point ID card, which we'll talk about a little bit more into the presentation. So you can see that this is also good only for people who are category 1 literally homeless. So these are people that are living rough and you can prove it, or they're living in a shelter. And so it gives the definition right there. They have to meet that particular criteria in order to qualify for the fee waiver. And then at the bottom, it will have the applicant's initials, and then you will put down the shelter name and the address and the shelter's provider number. And then the case manager or whoever is assisting the individual will sign and date it, and then print the name and also the email. So let's move on to the next slide. So this is that form, but this is just a blown up version for it. And at the bottom, you'll see that it says, please check the location type in which the household currently resides. Now, for example, in with my shelter, we not only have people using our shelter address that are staying in the shelter, but we have some people who maybe are not comfortable coming to a shelter but need an address. We provide them with the ability to use our shelter as the address. When it says where they reside, that would mean then if they're living rough, but they're using the shelter as the address, it would be the place not meant for human habitation. So you want to make sure that you're clear in how you're identifying people who are who need this particular fee waiver. We're going to move on to the next slide. So this is the service point ID, and I know Jill is going to be talking a little bit more about how you actually generate that from HMIS. But this is also something, if you're going to do the fee waiver, it is not negotiable. So you have to have the previous form that I just showed you, the verification form, and then you also need a service point ID. Next slide. Okay, so going back to that green grid, column 1, you need a social security number, and you need to have one of those things. So the social security card is the gold standard. However, the social security card is very difficult during the pandemic because social security offices are not generally open to the public right now because of the pandemic. And so there is a workaround, and that's where the exception unit is going to be really, really helpful. You'll have to produce 2 to 3 pieces of documentation that's official, containing either the entire social security number or the last 4 digits. So those are some suggestions, the W-2, the Social Security Form 1000, but it also can be something like MDHHS paperwork, a bill for a medical bill, something from an employer that would have, like, say, a check from an employer that would have the last 4 digits, individual plan of service from a mental health agency provider that would have the last 4 digits included on there. What you want to do is make sure that you have sufficient proof of the social security number, and that's where the exceptions, sending all of this documentation to exceptions for that approval, is going to be critical. Okay, column 2. This one has only 2 things that you can use, and you have to produce one of them. One is a certified birth certificate, the one with the raised seal, not the footprint one, the birth record, but it's got to be that, or a US passport. So more often than not, you're going to be going with the birth certificate. You can get a fee-waived birth certificate through the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services Vital Records for your program participant. And that is something that is not negotiable. As I said, it's free, but it will take a couple of weeks. You need to build that into your timeline. These things, as you're helping them put the documentation together, take a little bit of time. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. Okay, so column 3 is that identity verification. So that's where you normally would provide some sort of ID card. If you scroll down through that particular column, you'll see a teenager getting his or her driver's license for the first time can present their school ID. So the HMIS Service Point ID card is similar to that. And then there are other choices on that identity verification at the same time. So it could be something like asking the health department or the person's physician to provide a vaccination record, and they can print that off pretty easily. It doesn't cost any money. Some of the things that they list on there are things like a school record. That works sometimes. Sometimes the schools have closed or you can't find where the record is. Sometimes the person can't remember the schools that they went to, and so that makes it a little bit harder to get. So they have some suggestions there. If you run into a barrier, exceptions again can help, because what you do is you say, I'm having problems getting a second identity verification in addition to the Service Point ID card. They actually have a lot of other suggestions that do not appear on the Form 428 on the website. but they can give permission for you to use alternate identity verification types of proof documents. Column 4 is the proof of Michigan residency, and that's where you're going to use that homeless verification letter. And that's the one we showed you just a few minutes ago. And it's signed by your agency representative. It's verifying that this is who this person is, this is where they're staying, and then 2 pieces of mail that are official pieces of mail, not somebody writing to themselves, but official mail, say from MDHHS or from their insurance company or some other type of official mail that shows that the individual uses that address. One of the things you might want to keep, since there's going to be a lot of our folks may be receiving that stimulus money, to ask them to save the envelope. That's all you need to do is show them the envelope. That would be an official piece of mail that's coming right to your agency. Okay, I'm going to move on to the exception process. We're still feeling a little buried under. Next slide. Okay, so when do I use the exception process? If you're not sure if the documentation is complete, and you want to make sure before sending the client to the Secretary of State. Part of the reason that we started the ID task force was that we all knew of cases where somebody was going to the Secretary of State multiple times until they finally gave up. We don't want to frustrate anybody. And the second thing is there were reports that sometimes they would get the document that they were told was needed only to be told something else from the person behind the counter, because sometimes people individually interpret things a different way. So I think that the most important thing is to get the documents, scan them in, email them to the exceptions unit, and we will have an email for you during the presentation, and you'll also will have that as part of the documentation that you're going to get. You're going to scan in the email or scan the documentation in the email to Secretary of State. And that also includes if you don't have a full Social Security number and you don't have a Social Security card. If you want to substitute something, you also would have to scan it in. Or if you're not sure what to substitute, scan it in. And then I have down here again, you can't substitute a document for the birth certificate unless it's a passport. And so that's something that I know exceptions gets all the time. People will say, well, it's too hard for them to get a birth certificate. In Michigan, it's easy. If the person was born in a different state, it can be more difficult. It can be cumbersome. It can take a while in order to get the birth certificate. I was born in Pennsylvania, and I have to say they have one of the slowest turnarounds that I think of most states. It's usually a month, 2 months, something like that. One of the other things will be if your program participant was born in Puerto Rico, just to give you a heads up, you will need to spend some time on this. During that hurricane a couple of years ago, Hurricane Maria, the Vital Records Bureau was destroyed. And when that happened, some of the blanks got out into the community and people were selling Puerto Rican birth certificates. So the Secretary of State is very cautious about approving something with that particular birth certificate. And you will have to communicate with somebody in Puerto Rico in order to be able to get this, but it probably will take a lot more time. And so you just need to be aware of that. Okay, next slide. Okay, so the exception process. If you only have a partial Social Security number, and that's going to happen more and more right now during the pandemic because of the backlog at Social Security office and the fact that they're not open for general customers coming in. So if you only have a partial number, you need to go through exceptions because they have to approve the documents. All right, next. And I did want to remind people there's no cost for a Social Security card. I see on the internet up to $70, $100 that they're saying, oh, we'll help you get it. There is nothing that they're going to do that you can't do. And chances are they're going to run into the same backlog and you'll be shy $70. There's no cost. And then this also, the exception process reduces that number of trips, but it does require a little more upfront work. However, if you build this into your workflow, it's not an insurmountable amount of work. It's just trying to help that person uncover and look for documents. Okay, next. Also, you can call the exceptions unit if you have questions, and they're happy to direct you through this. There, as I said, with the Real ID laws, they have to follow certain protocols, and we want to make sure that the individuals are having the best experience that they can have. And you see the birth certificate comes up again. That's because it comes up a lot. I get a lot of emails that say, well, I want to substitute something for the birth certificate. You can't do that. Okay, next slide. So these are some helpful hints. And the one thing that I also wanted to mention is that when you are going to the Secretary of State's or going through the exceptions process, you will get a one of two results back. It will say either the individual is not eligible for exception or the individual is eligible for an exception, and it will tell you what it is. So when it says the individual is not eligible for exception, that means you've got all the right documents. And it'll say that's the golden ticket. So when you send your program participant, you want to send them with that particular thing as well. They'll also ask you which branch office they're going to, so they will alert the branch office that your program participant is coming in. Make sure they have all of the documents with them. Just because you sent them to exceptions, they physically still have to see them at the Social Security branch office along with the not eligible for exception. That means they don't have to then go through the process of faxing all of this to exceptions and then waiting 48 hours and your program participant has to go back again. The Social Security number, please don't send somebody with partial Social Security numbers without having that reviewed by exceptions. That is really critical. They need to do that and again give you the not eligible for exception. And so they would then tell you when you can go to the office. And here's the other thing. If it says provide two documents, but you have 4, provide all of them. Less is more does not apply to this. The more proof documents that you have, the better. So those are really, really important. So we're going to review the waiver packet. So this is what's required and then what is referenced. So I mentioned at the beginning of this that we have forms that are required. So we have the release of information for exceptions. So you'll see that we'll be showing that in a few minutes. When you are emailing the information to them, you must have this signed, which allows the Michigan Department of State to communicate with you about exceptions. You're going to also email exceptions the request for the review, and particularly if you know what it is, like say, Social Security, only 4 digits of Social Security are available or something like that. The fee waiver, the mailing address, that one on the agency letterhead that lists your agency or an agency as being the area where they get their mail and perhaps are staying. There is an alternate form if the person has a family relationship and they use that address. I don't recommend this because this is way more work, because not only then are you obligated to provide all of those proof documents for the individual, but also for the person who is living at that address. You're going to have to get a birth certificate from them and social security number, social security card, as well as their lease or mortgage papers, utility bills, and that sort of thing. So that's one of the things that it's better if they can use an agency address. There are fewer forms for them to do. And they will not allow them to use things like right now, a post office box is not allowed as an address. It's got to be an actual street address. And the family relationship address verification has to be a related family member, because you also have to submit proof as to how that person is related. It can't be a friend that they consider to be family. It's got to actually be a blood relative. And then another thing that we are including in the packet is the quick appointment request spreadsheet. There are some pandemic only workarounds when Secretary of State gets backlogged. There are also some reference forms that are in there too. So there's a guideline for generating an HMIS ID card. It's super easy. I can do it. You can do it. If you're not on the HMIS system, you can partner with an agency that is and have them help you with the record. Michigan Department of State, their exception and fee waiver referral guide and FAQs, that is also in there. So it will answer a lot of questions that you have, because I know when I go to a training, sometimes I think, oh yeah, this makes perfect sense. And then I go to do it and I'm like, oh, I think I'm missing something. That chances are will help you. You also have the ability to email me and if you have questions as well. And then of course, this PowerPoint will also be part of that. Okay, so let's move on to the next. All right. So the exceptions release of information and request for review. This is what this looks like. This is the disclose, obtain information pertaining to my housing for the organization listed below. This is being filled out by your program participant. And so the Secretary of State requires that, but you also have to put that on your letterhead. So that is to make sure that that we are actually, it's verifying and it protects all of us that we're actually working with this particular individual. Next slide. All right, and then this is the second part of that, the request for review of documentation. As you can see, there's a lot of T crossing and I dotting here, where they want to make sure that that the individual is is fully participating and is a part of this whole process. And then you're signing this as the agency representative. And you'll notice it says local branch office. So the place where you want to go, you want to send that particular individual, that particular Secretary of State branch, you should put there, because they will also make sure that that branch is aware that someone's coming. The most important thing, so anywhere that you see brackets on this particular form, so down below where the numbers are, you'll see program participant name. You have to fill that in. So those are prompts just to let you know. The same thing, you want to, you have to produce a brief description as to why the program participant cannot meet the department's identification requirements. So for example, the social security number, it could be during the pandemic, the Social Security office, local one, is closed, and the individual would need to submit a state ID in order to be able to get as a proof document there. They don't have the ability to have as much wiggle room when that particular agency is closed to the general public. So you would just let them know that they are not able during the pandemic to get their Social Security card. And then you also would make sure that you add that homeless verification form as well, the shelter letter, and the ID card, the HMIS ID card, and then any other documents that you have. So that those pieces, 2 pieces of mail, and any proof documents you have for the Social Security card, all of those things would be scanned into one particular email. Okay, next slide. All right, so this is that third-party homeless verification that we showed at the beginning of the presentation. This is a really critical part of this. They must have this. And this shows the address where they're staying. So that's the shelter provider name, address down in that little box towards the end of the page. On the right side of your screen, the family member residency verification is the one where they are receiving, if they're not receiving their mail at an agency and they don't want to receive their mail at an agency, there's more proof that you have to provide. And you can see as you're going down this, you're going to have to prove the birth certificate, provide a birth certificate, and those are the relationships. But under other, it still can't be a friend. It has to be a blood relationship. And then that helps prove that that person is related. And then all of those things, that as if the individual was applying for their own ID card, you're going to have to supply. So it is much more complex. That's why I don't recommend that as a rule that you actually use that particular process, but it is there if an individual is adamant that that's where they want that to go. Now, some people will say, well, how about I have an ID that is that's just recently expired, and so can I just get another ID sent, or I've lost my ID? Here's the thing, if it's not going, if that address where it was sent to, and the address that's on that particular secretary or on the particular state ID is not valid anymore, then you can't do it that way, because you have to start from scratch with the proof documents. If sometimes they've already proved, you may not have to provide as many proofs, but to qualify for the fee waiver, you're still going to have the third-party homeless verification, and also which proves the address. And you're also going to have to provide them with the HMIS ID card as well, which is their photo ID proof. You can also, again, because the more documents you can provide, if you have a second photo ID, say Michigan Department of Corrections ID, you can also add that to the mix as well. Okay, next slide. So now things are a little different, because you can't just send somebody over to the Secretary of State because of the pandemic. Instead, you have to go online and make an appointment. Some areas of the state, especially Southeast Michigan, have quite a backlog, 3 to 4 months to get an appointment. So the ID Taskforce has been meeting regularly with Secretary of State's office. And so we have a couple of workarounds. So the first one is going on the website, filling out the form, and asking for a next day appointment, because every day they keep a block of time available for next day appointments. Sometimes the next day appointments disappear as you're actually filling out the information. So it can be cumbersome, but more times than not, you'll be able to accommodate somebody within a day or two for their appointment, that they'll be able to jump the line. In other parts of the state, you may not have this as an issue at all, and you can make an appointment and you can get in that day or the next day, and it will tell you where to go. Sometimes it will route you to a different office. There has to be the ability to have some flexibility, because some offices suddenly get shut down if they've had a COVID outbreak. Some offices may be so backlogged that they're not taking next day appointments. So you want to also warn your program participant that it may be a little bit more difficult to get to the Secretary of State's office, but it's not impossible. And to be willing to help them brainstorm the transportation issues when that becomes an issue. Next slide. Okay, so sometimes that doesn't work, and especially in the more populated areas of the state. So if we can click on the link, we have another way to do this. This is if the first one in going online and trying to get a next day appointment doesn't work, then you can do this. You can take this form, put your program participant, or if you have a number of them on there, their phone number, their email address, what we're requesting, and then the branch office that you're looking for. And then you're going to email that to James Fackler at the Michigan Department of State. Now, James is the head of all of the branch offices. He will do his best to get an appointment for you for the next day or within a couple of days. He will also, if they have a COVID outbreak or if there's an issue where it's impossible to get into that office, he'll advise you of another office that would be nearby to be able to use to get an appointment so that your program participant can get an appointment. James is somebody who is very willing to work with us, and his email address is there as well. If you have questions, he's also willing to take questions too. If there's any issues, he's also willing to troubleshoot that. Because as you can imagine, Michigan is a very vast state, and there's a lot of Secretary of State offices throughout. And while everyone is trained, they also have a lot of different programs. And sometimes if someone doesn't often deal with individuals who are homeless, they may have forgotten the training about the fee waiver or something like that. James is very, very good at troubleshooting that and helping to set them straight. So that is another tool in your toolbox. Okay, next slide. So,
Elizabeth, we do have some questions that I was unable to answer in the chat. If we can go over those real quick before Jill. All right. So the first one is, if someone has a general service address for their mail through the U.S. Postal Service, are they able to use that as their address in lieu of a shelter or service provider?
No, and that's a federal rule. They can't use that because they can't live at that address. And it's also a government. You can't live at a government address.
All right. The next one is, can they accept expired passports for column 2?
That would go through exceptions, but usually they will.
Okay, thank you. The next one is, will DocuSign signatures be acceptable for the forms that you presented in this training?
No, they want they want a signature on there, not a DocuSign. However, that also, when they set this up, I think DocuSign wasn't as big a deal. I would also email James, and I'm happy to do that too, but James could help you with that if they will accept it. Government's a little bit slower at accepting some of those things, some of the government agencies, and there may be rules against it because of Real ID, I don't know, but they've asked us before for a signature on there, because you have to have the individual signature and the case manager's signature on there, and then just scanning that and sending it to them.
Okay, so this one I'm not sure if you'll have an answer for, but I'll throw it out there. Someone is asking if anyone has had experience with replacing or renewing the ID online at sosexpress.gov, because when they keep trying to get it, it shows that it cannot be renewed online.
Right, you can't get the fee waiver online. So that's why they have not, the pandemic hit as they were upgrading their website, and that part has not been made live. So you can't do the fee waiver online. You have to pay the $10. And if the person has not completed all the proof documents, then they are going to have, or if it's been 8 years, they'll want a new photo, just like with your driver's license, then you have to go back into the office.
Thanks. The next one is coordinated entry available to verify a client's address at an emergency shelter if they are not the direct provider? So I think they're asking, do you have to get the HMIS ID printed at a shelter, or can it be through a coordinated entry worker?
It can be through a coordinated entry worker. They're not worried about that. It doesn't show on the service point ID, and Joe will go over the particulars, the boxes that have to be checked to print it, but there's no agency name on it. It's the person's name, their date of birth. It has to say service point on there. So yes, they can easily make that.
Awesome. This one, again, you might not know because it's not your area, but do they accept Washington IDs for a second card in column 3?
For the second card, they will accept pretty much any ID that's a photo ID with that, with the original one, or you can provide another alternate proof document, but that's the legal presence one. So, but they won't just accept it, will not generate the fee waiver if you don't have a service point ID.
I'm just checking to see the other ones.
Okay.
This one maybe Jill would answer. They're asking, is there a homeless service provider in Kent County that is now publishing the service point ID? They are not aware of one.
That they're publishing?
Yeah, so this is the deal with HMIS IDs. Any participating HMIS service provider has the capability to print HMIS ID cards. So I don't know in particular about Kent County who's using or who is printing the cards or not, but every participating agency has the ability to do that. We're going to talk a little bit further in a little bit about those different ways that you can partner with HMIS participating agencies. And then for those HMIS participating agencies, we're going to be talking about types of equipment that they might need and how to utilize the system to do that. So in particular for Kent County, I don't know that, that's something that the agencies in Kent County will be processing those cards.
Okay, thanks. I think that's all the questions for now. I did want to say that the bulk of the questions are asking about how to get a free birth certificate. So if you missed it in the chat, I did say that we don't have time to go over that today, but Micah will be having a presentation on that in the near future. So look forward to that. I'll keep answering questions in the chat as I can. Otherwise, it's off to you, Jill.
Great, thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Jill Shoemaker, and I am on the statewide HMIS team. And I wanted to talk today about the process of generating an HMIS ID card. As Elizabeth mentioned, ServicePoint has the capability of creating an acceptable form of identification for the fee waiver process. The documentation is actually an HMIS identification card. That card is printed right from the ServicePoint software. It's a fairly simple process. We're gonna walk through it. The ID card will actually be printed right there at the agency. And this is for clients who are receiving services at an HMIS participating agency. However, if your client is receiving services at a non-HMIS participating agency, we encourage you to work with your local shelter or a HARA agency or another coordinated entry agency within your community that can assist you in being able to generate these cards. The person actually has to be entered into the HMIS system, the service point software, in order to receive or being able to generate one of these cards. And so if you're working with a shelter or a coordinated entry agency, that client's information will be entered into HMIS in order to generate a card. So I'm going to take a few minutes today before I actually show you the process of printing off the card. I want to take a few minutes to talk about equipment needs, and we get a lot of questions about that. So as I mentioned, any agency who is an HMIS participating agency, meaning you're using the service point system, is able to generate an ID card. And so the type of equipment that's needed for that would be a camera or some sort of an older decommissioned cell phone that can be used to take a picture of the client. That picture would then be uploaded into the client profile on the HMIS. And that picture will also be included in the ID card. You will also need some sort of a printer. So we have some printer recommendations. The printer being able to print at a 600 DPI or greater. The monochrome laser printers are recommended, but you can certainly use an inkjet printer that has a high quality and is capable of printing at the 600 DPI. Some sort of a paper stock that would be a thicker paper stock. The Xerox quality paper may not produce great ID cards. That thicker stock produces a better card. You have the option to have a laminating machine or purchase some of the laminating sheets. Those can be purchased at your local office supply product store. This helps to safeguard the identification. So when it's printed on that card stock, if it goes through the laminating machine or you use those laminating sheets, that keeps the identification card, it keeps it, and it safeguards the card itself so that it does not, the color printing does not, come off in someone's pocket or wallet or something like that. So you can actually do this with very little dollars, put towards it. I can tell you that we were talking just the other day, and Elizabeth was saying that they, were able to get a laminating machine for like $9. So agencies are absolutely able to get this equipment at a pretty low cost. And as far as the actual printing of the ID, it's a pretty simple process. From the statewide HMIS team, we do have some step-by-step instructional document to help you if you are an HMIS agency and you have never run the ID cards. We have step-by-step instructional document to help you through that. It's also going to be something that I am going to actually demonstrate using our service point training site. So before I do that, do we have any other questions about equipment or the process of working with a local HMIS participating agency? Okay, great. Then I am going to go ahead and I'm going to actually share my screen. And Laurel, could you make me presenter so I can pull up the HMIS system here? Great, thank you very much. All right, I hope everybody can see my screen. This is just some fake client data here in our training site. And for those of you who may not use HMIS, each of the folks that receive services in our homeless services area and is receiving services at like a shelter, the coordinated entry, transitional housing project with rapid rehousing and PSH. They are entered into HMIS, and each person has what we call a client profile. And I have a client profile projected here on the screen, and our client's name is Handbag, and each client also has an HMIS ID number, and that will explain part of what is included in the HMIS ID. So the way that you actually upload a picture is there are two different places within the client profile that you do that. We have a file attachment section here. On our step-by-step instructional document, we do actually have a naming protocol process that we encourage our HMIS participating agencies to use. That way, when you upload a file attachment, you know exactly what it is. So in this instance, we have a client photo, 2019, March 27th, and this is for HBAG, so first initial, last name. And then up here at the top of the client profile on the right-hand side, you see that there is a space here that we can actually upload the photo to so that the picture is attached to the client profile. So I'm actually going to show you the process of that. I'm going to choose a file, and I am going to bring this right up. And we have our client profile there. And this is the client photo that's being uploaded to our client profile here. And so we have a picture of Handbag. And so I am going to go ahead and right here on the client profile screen, I'm actually able to issue the ID card. And what I want to do when I issue that ID card is I want to make sure that we have several items checked here. So our radio box for Service Point training site is checked. We want to make sure that we display the Service Point logo here. This is going to be critical because we want Secretary of State to know that this was actually printed from Service Point, which means that our client is receiving some sort of a service in our homeless service arena within our communities. We want to include our client ID photo. We want to make sure that we include our date of birth, and we can also have a signatory line if we would like to. So I am going to go ahead now and just generate the ID. And this is what it's going to look like. It is going to look just like this. So let me just increase this a little bit. So you can see here that I had uploaded my client profile, and it was this beautiful red handbag. And we also have the Service Point logo here, which is critical in alerting our Secretary of State staff that this is a client who is receiving some services within our homeless arena. This will for purposes of today's training, because we are in the training site, it does say the Service Point training site. When you're printing something from the live site, it will say Service Point. So we have the name, handbag, and the client ID number and the date of birth. And then you'll also see down here that there's a barcode. And this is always attached to our client IDs. We have the option in Service Point to use these scan codes on our client IDs to, for instance, if we have a shelter who provides breakfast, lunch, and dinner throughout the day, what we know that our shelters do is to print out a client ID for each of the folks who are staying in the shelter or would be attending one of our breakfast, lunch, or dinner during the day. And then as they come into lunch, their card is scanned in and a service is created for their client profile. So this is a way for a really easy way to scan folks in who are receiving, many folks who are receiving one service during a designated time period during the day. So that's why you'll always see a barcode on here. So that's what the ID looks like. And depending upon the type of printer that you have, you will, you will just place that ID card on the card stock that you have available. We do have, what I showed you here is just producing or generating the ID card as a single card. We also have instructions on being able to produce mass ID cards. So let's say you were a shelter and you had 30 folks come in the night before. You can actually, instead of issuing or printing out each individual card, you can do that in a group. So we have something where you can generate an ID card for more than one person. So you can, print it out for all 30 all at once. And so there's a process to do that. I'm not going to spend the time today to work through that particular option of generating ID cards. That would be something that we would ask you to send in a help desk ticket to our HMIS help desk, and one of us on the HMIS staff would be happy to show you how to create lists and print things off that way. And so, because that's a longer process and would take a little bit more time than what we have today. So that is really an easy process for generating the ID cards right within Service Point. So I'll go ahead and stop and answer any questions that may have come up during that demonstration.
Thanks, Jill. This is Laurel with Micah. I am going to take over from Allison, I believe, with asking the questions.
Okay, great.
We're getting quite a few about the photo, so I might have you just review again questions about what if they don't have a photo or the photo for the client is not in HMIS, could the process for getting that?
Yeah, so if they don't have a photo needs to be taken. So whether that is taken at the shelter, so if you are a participating HMIS agency, perhaps you would have a camera on site, or you would have some sort of a decommissioned cell phone that can take a picture. Any of those options work. And so once the picture is taken, it needs to be uploaded into the HMIS. And so that is uploaded. So the picture is taken, you save the picture, that photo, as a JPEG onto your, your standalone machine. And then you upload that photo into the client profile. And once you upload that into the client profile, then you're able to have the picture attached to the client ID number. And so if you are a non-participating service point agency, then you will want to make sure that you are partnering with a coordinated entry or HARA agency or your local shelter or something like that.
Thank you, Jill. And then we have an individual who is wondering if you have a list of requirements or items for the printer that you could share.
Yes, it is part of the document that we have for that we have included in the document section of the webinar here, and the documents that will be going out. We do have some printer recommendations, and then just a few of the other equipment like the camera and the laminating machine or laminating sheets. Those are the basic equipment requirements that you would need to generate the picture itself, the photo itself, and then printing the ID and then making sure that it's laminated and to safeguard that ID.
All right, I don't see any more questions coming in at the moment, although I do see someone's raising their hand. Allison put a note in the chat earlier for folks. Instead of raising your hand and unmuting, we're asking that you use the question box to let us know what questions you have, and we can read those on the webinar or follow up if necessary. I'll keep looking. I got a little bit to go back and make sure I haven't missed anything, but at this moment, I don't see anything else for you, Jill.
Okay, great. Then I can go ahead and pass the screen back over to you.
Well, Jill,
thanks
I think
everyone.
Are you going to go through the document that you currently have up?
I already did go through this document.
Okay.
Yes, I went through the document. This document is a step-by-step instructional with some pictures included with it so that there's some visual here. I went through this process and demonstrated it. So it's exactly what I did when I did the demonstration.
Perfect. Well, thank you. I'm going to change back to sharing the screen and get back to our PowerPoint then. Everybody hang with me while I get the tech to work. All right, and you should be seeing the PowerPoint again. And
yes.
So, Jill, you do not need me to go through the generating an HMIS ID card guidelines, correct?
Right, correct.
Do you want me to open the referral guide and FAQ? Elizabeth?
Okay, yes, sorry. Yes, I think that would be fine if you just open that up just so that they have an idea as to what this looks like. So this particular packet has the reference points to various questions that have come up. And as we scroll down through the document, so it has information about that. It will then go into FAQs, but it talks about each column and what kinds of things are needed. And then the FAQs are listed, and these are actually questions that we've gotten from previous webinars. And I also did want to add that I just reached out to James Fackler about the DocuSign question, and he has not responded yet, but we will make sure that we get you a good answer to that. I am monitoring my email on my phone. So I have reached out to him, and we'll let you know about that. This particular document is really a handy sort of cheat sheet to have, in that I think an awful lot of the questions that you may have regarding the process, until it becomes familiar to you, this is one of those things where it feels like it's really huge until you've done it a few times, and then you realize it's really not a big deal at all. It's just a matter of just changing some of the ways that we may have thought about applying for a state ID. And this covers everything from exceptions to fee waivers, the kinds of documents that you need. And as with most government programs, if you don't have all the documentation, it doesn't work. So you need to make sure that you're really careful about that. And that's where the exceptions unit, again, will come in handy, making sure that you do have all the documents before you send somebody over to an appointment that may be difficult to get. So we want to make sure we've got all of everything all tidied up there.
Elizabeth, we're getting questions about the documents that we're sharing here, including the one that Jill walked through. So we will be sending these out after the fact. So I know we're scrolling through some of this quickly. Don't feel like you have to be catching all of this in your notes.
None of you speed read, right? Yes, I know it's kind of like, it looks like, oh my goodness, there's a lot of stuff. But here's the thing, we actually are really thorough in making sure that you have every bit of information you could possibly need. And so these are ways that you can get quick answers. If you run into something where you don't have an answer, I will tell you that I've been through this process so many times. Feel free to drop me an email. And my email is ekelly@hopewarmingpontiac.org. ekelly, K-E-L-L-Y, at hopewarmingpontiac.org. And you can also get, emails will get forwarded to me if you email Allison at MICA, who originally sent this out. One way or another, we'll make sure that you get the information. Our next ID task force meeting is on Wednesday. It's not this Wednesday, the next Wednesday at 2 p.m. So if you are not on that list, if you can shoot an email to either Allison or me, we'll make sure that you get on the list too, and get an invitation and a link to the webinar. It's done via Zoom. So it's nice, easy peasy, but it also gives you a chance to ask questions, because chances are, even though we think we've created so much information, there's still going to be something that may be something new that you've uncovered. So feel free to join in on that particular conversation. And in that conversation, we're also going to be talking about birth certificates and Social Security cards as well.
And Elizabeth, just a point of clarification, I think the emails for this webinar were sent out from me, Laurel at MICA. You can also respond to that. I'll receive them and make sure they get forwarded to Elizabeth or Allison, if that makes the process a little simpler. And let's see, do we have some more slides to go through? This is our HMIS.
Those were Jill's slides. I think she went through.
All right. Then Elizabeth, I'm not seeing other questions coming in. Oh, there's a question about the next webinar. I'm assuming that is for the Vital Docs, the birth certificate process that Allison mentioned, or perhaps the next time that we do this training, or even the State ID Task Force. This information we'll be making sure to email out. We do not have another webinar either on the birth certificates or the State ID fee waiver process scheduled yet, but we'll make sure that we get that information to you as they become available. If it's for the State ID Task Force, let us know that you would like to attend that. Send any of us the email with your email address, and we'll make sure you get on the list, as Elizabeth said. But not seeing any other questions. Elizabeth, is there anything else that you would like to say to the group before we wrap up today?
The only thing I would say is I really encourage you to use this process. It's a way to help people connect with documents that are really important to them and can help them with resolution of their homelessness. So if you have questions, feel free to reach out. We'll coach you through it. But it's actually not a very difficult process, just has a lot of paperwork, that's all. All right, thank you all for attending. We really appreciate the work that all of you do.
And I also just want to say thank you to Elizabeth. As the lead of the State ID Taskforce for so many years, you have made all of this possible. We're thrilled to have you present this information and to walk us through the steps of how we can take advantage of this. Thank you, Jill, for showing us the HMIS process. Thanks, Allison, for coordinating all of this. And thank you again, everyone. We wish you a happy new year and look forward to working with you on these issues and other issues moving forward. So thank you.